up, everybody? I've been asked kind of how I've been doing things nutrition-wise during this situation with the coronavirus or when there's food shortages. Truth be told, I'm really a huge paranoid person, you can call it, and I tend to plan way ahead, so I legitimately have not had a problem due to my huge planning ahead of time. And I did see this coming, but I did come up with a little tips and tidbits, things that you can do if you're in the struggle and you're in it now and you didn't plan and prepare ahead, on what you can do the next time and what you can do currently now, okay? So first, number one is availability in storage, okay? Now, obviously, food availability is what I'm referring to, and storage is your ability to store food. Do you have a chest freezer? How big is your freezer? Do you have one refrigerator? Do you have two refrigerators? Obviously, that's going to impact how much you can buy, what you can buy, and how much you can store for a duration of time. That way you can avoid going to the grocery stores when it's obviously total mayhem. Abundance of a diet necessity. So obviously looking at your plan, most people's diets, you know, specifically the population we're talking to, mainly rice, meats, oatmeal, maybe some fruits, broccoli, green beans, things like that. So obviously your necessities in a time like this where people are picking them over are going to be protein sources, specifically chicken. And obviously, as you can see in the grocery stores, as they get picked over, it goes down the line. It goes chicken first, and then it goes red meat. And after red meat, after ground beef, it goes steak. And after steak, you have no turkey. And after no turkey, then you have no pork. But it's usually kind of like a little hierarchy of what appeals to people and what they purchase first. So what's abundance in the diet are the things that you're going to need. So you take a piece of paper, you write down the things that you need that are most important, okay? Where to shop and where to avoid. My personal experience, going to discount grocery stores, like a ShopRite, like a Price Chopper, or any sort of discount stores in your area, or even membership wholesale grocery stores, those are the first places everybody's going to go to. That is where it's going to be the most picked over, okay? Now, you have to understand that just because your local grocery store might not have what you need doesn't mean the surrounding town might not have what you need. For example, the grocery stores in my town, since there's only 2, 3, they've been pretty much picked over. This is after the fact, a week into this mess. But if I drove 25 minutes to a bigger town where there's 5 grocery stores in that particular town, I found everything I needed. And that's generally where I shop anyway because there's a Whole Foods there. But since then I've gone shopping multiple times and the stores have been completely full other than a few various things, frozen items and such. So you might need to travel to an area or a town that has a great amount of grocery stores per town. That one had 5, so that's a lot. I'm also looking at population density. If you're near a city, obviously those grocery stores surrounding that city will be completely picked over. Most of the times in cities, people tend to eat out a little higher percent than people in areas of neighborhoods and stuff like that. So when something like this happens and people stop eating out as much, they go to the grocery stores and there's not enough grocery stores in that particular area to feed that entire large population. So keep that in mind. You might need to go out, drive a little bit to find what you need because it is there. I have clients in Connecticut who have a lot of trouble finding what they need. I still have not had any trouble. I've had a lot of clients not have any trouble either because of where they are shopping. Also, the little mom and pop grocery stores that might be like only 1 or 2 of them are small are often always overlooked. That's another good one. And the third one is online shopping, where you can go to an online butcher or your local butcher and you can get meats shipped to your house because, again, that's not the first place people are going to go. Eventually it will catch on, people will start ordering them, and obviously they'll have a higher frequency than normal, but that's a great option. Building store large amounts of foods. So obviously when you have your list of your necessities and say you hit the jackpot and you nail a bunch of poultry or whatever meat you might need, you want to vacuum seal them, bag them, and freeze them into your storage units until you're in your chest freezer. And if you don't have a chest freezer, you can easily probably find one even on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist for sale, probably for 15, 20 bucks. I found them for cheap. I actually had mine was for free. Somebody didn't want it, I just took it and it works great. Or you can find them obviously at your department store before they've closed down. And obviously that's future reference, because at this point in time, a lot of those stores are closed. 2, conserving food and making adjustments. So say you went out, you made your list, and you're still in a bind, and they're limiting 2 packs of chicken per person, and you have to conserve what you have because you're worried you might run out. And obviously that's a very legitimate concern, because the food supply is always going to remain. It's just the amount that's there might be reduced, and especially people like us who eat a lot, we're not going to really have everything we need. So what you can do, because the majority of strength athletes and bodybuilders tend to overeat protein anyway, is you can lower your protein intake of your diet. I suggest lowering your protein intake to 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of body weight, okay? So I'm 260 pounds, that's me eating 260 grams of protein, which is roughly what I eat now anyway. So in my case, if I was going to conserve, I would bring it down. Probably like to 215 or something. So just to keep in mind, if you're going to lower your protein intake to conserve food, make sure you make up those calories with something of what you do have. Specifically, my first choice would be carbohydrates. So if you drop, say, for example, 50 grams of protein, you want to add 50 grams of carbs back. The reason I choose carbs, not fats, is because carbs have a higher thermal effect than fats do. So it's, in my opinion, it's kind of the next best thing. Plus, carbs have a protein sparing effect. And of course, many of you guys might not be as active, so it's less worrisome. And if you're really not active, you might not need to add any carbs back, just because you're making up that calorie difference that you normally won't be because you're stuck at home. Don't worry about muscle loss. I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, I'm gonna lose muscle. You're not gonna lose muscle. 1 gram per pound of body weight is still plenty. Obviously, if you have a high body fat percent, say you can't see your abs, they're not visible, you might want to use a lower end or even lower, because obviously if you're 280 pounds and you're considered obese or overweight, you don't want to eat the amount of grams of protein per your body weight, of course. Lower carb intake, and don't worry about the muscle loss, obviously, specifically too, because if you're dropping 50 grams of protein, you're adding 50 carbs back, you're still in the same amount of calories. So really the protein muscle loss might come from if your protein's really low and your calories are really low and you're not training at all. Then you gotta worry. Lower carb intake and make up the difference with fats and carbs. So if you're in a situation where, because I know some people are like, oh, I can't find rice anywhere, I can't find pasta, all the breads are gone, then you can also sub those out as well. So on top of lowering your protein intake to conserve your protein, you can lower your carb intake, cut them back, and increase your fats, because nobody's freaking out and trying to buy tons of olive oil or any oils. The oils are still relatively stocked. All those nuts are still stocked. Nut butters are still there. So those are options you can do to if you take out 200 calories of carbs, bring in 200 calories of fats to make up the difference. That way you can have a more sustainable diet during this time where food is a little more scarce. All right. Substitutions. So I've had a lot of people ask me, they're like, oh, Chris, no chicken breast, what can I do? What do I sub out? And there seems to be always meat. Even the grocery store next to me, where there wasn't any poultry at one time, it was like completely wiped out, and there's no red meat either. But there's also frozen bags of shrimp. There's also fresh seafood. Obviously that comes with a little more cost. It might be an issue for some, so you want to keep that in mind, but I'm just going to go over it as the questions have come to me, all right? So chicken breast, you can substitute with dark meat chicken, which would be the chicken thighs. You can substitute, obviously, with beef, different percent of fats. You'll just have to adjust your dietary fat intake for the day. Obviously, if you're substituting dark meat chicken for white meat chicken, you're going to need to lower the added fats in the day to make up that difference. You can go online for one of those nutritional databases to figure out what 3 ounces of dark meat is and 3 ounces of chicken breast, and figure out the fat difference so you can make those adjustments to your plan. Fish, cod, tilapia, shrimp, scallops, in that situation, you could easily substitute that for chicken. Just know that it's not the best to, if you buy cod that's previously frozen, you can't freeze it again, okay? So in this case, it's almost better just buying the frozen cod, tilapia, shrimp, or scallops, and then freezing them if you're buying them in bulk or eat them over time. If you want to eat fresh, use cook fresh. Just make sure you cook it and eat it within 48 hours. And then if you're adding fish, obviously fish is very lean, much leaner than chicken, so you might need to add a little bit more fat to the diet, not take away like you would with dark meat chicken. Sirloin, so a lot of people normally have steak on their diet and they don't have steak, so a lot of the beef that's left over is beef that many people don't want, which is the 80% ground beef, which is pretty darn high in fat. So that's obviously not the best choice, but it's still workable if you need it and you're in dire need. You just need to cut back a lot of fat intake in that particular day, or you could even supplement the ground beef 80% with a little bit of dark meat chicken, or a little bit of chicken breast, and have like a little bit of ground beef and a little bit of chicken with each meal, say for 3 meals, instead of eating, say, 6 ounces of 80% ground beef, because that's a lot of fat in one sitting. I personally like to take the macros of proteins, fats, and carbs and evenly distribute them between 4 or 6 meals, or however how many meals you eat in a day. Fresh vegetables, a lot of fresh vegetables get picked over quickly, and just like fresh vegetables that people either appeal, they don't. When they get them, you can't really buy tons of them and save them unless you freeze them. So, but I noticed a lot of fresh vegetables were picked over. They pick them quick, lettuces and stuff, but you can always find frozen. If you can't find frozen, you can do canned. One way or another, the grocery store is going to have one of these 3. It may not be what you want, what you like, but you kind of got to make do. Egg whites, a lot of egg whites are picked over, which is interesting. It's kind of like the whole hierarchy of protein demand. Once chicken's gone, the next thing goes gone, and then once their eggs are gone, people go to egg whites. So I've been telling a lot of my clients to substitute whey protein for egg whites, since they're virtually both fat-free and they're kind of even exchange. Not the most ideal, but it will totally work. Whole eggs and nut butters. So for example, say if they had egg whites for breakfast with 2 whole eggs, I would just take the total protein they need really and do whey, and substitute the fat from the eggs with a nut butter of your choice, of course. Fruits, fresh fruits. A lot of fruits get picked over quickly, especially the ones that like apples, because apples stay pretty good in the fridge for a long time. But if you don't have fresh fruit, you can do frozen. If you don't have frozen, you can do canned. And all you gotta do is just adjust for your portioning control. There's no adjustments in the fresh vegetables in your diet, and there's no adjustments in your fruit. You don't need to play with fats or anything like that. They're usually just an even exchange. You just have to make sure that if you're getting 15 grams of carbs from banana, you measure it right, 15 carbs from pineapple or whatever fruit you might want. Another great go-to is supplements. I have tons of this stuff on hand because it takes a long time to expire. Basically not perishable. Meal replacements and bars. My first go would be meal replacement, specifically animal meal, because it's made from whole foods. So at all times I have 4 jugs of it on hand, just in case. And then I also have at least 2 or 3 boxes of bars. And that's a great meal replacement as well, and that will help preserve more of your chicken. So just like what's going on now, a lot of the supplement stores are considered essential, so they are still selling protein, meal replacements or protein bars. Chicken's flying off the shelf, so these are certain things that you can do. Cut back your protein, substitute other meats from chicken breast, make adjustments in the fat intake, have a meal replacement once per day to further conserve your meats and your stuff and your meats and steak. And you can even use bars if you're in an emergency. So those are all things that you can do. It's not ideal. It's not probably the best possible scenario, but you can make it work, and you can make it through the whole entire thing without stepping backwards and maintaining. So really, your whole goal during this time is to maintain. With the gyms being closed and diet not being optimal from what you need it to be, don't think like, oh man, I've got to make my gains. Just have your expectations be correct. Is it possible? Of course it is. But it's not the perfect environment. So just make sure your expectations are adjusted appropriately. Last one, learning experience, future. So obviously, this whole issue could have been a lot worse. And it's good that it did happen and people are learning from this. So moving forward, you can make the necessary adjustments and have a plan ahead, and also make sure that you see something coming. I knew this was going to happen. And I think early February, even in mid-January, I was kind of stockpiling a few things and jugs of water and stuff like that, because I knew it was going to happen. because people are always late to the party. Most people do not prepare. They wait for something to happen and then they react. I'm the exact opposite. I want to make sure I'm prepared all of the time, and obviously you can't all the time, but you can make the best moves and calls yourself to make sure you're not in a bind, so you're not worried, stressed, or without things that you need. And that's just outside of bodybuilding. It's just with everything. You know, you got to prepare. So learn to plan ahead, see things coming. Very important. Stock the house with non-perishable items. So like cans of tuna, cans of chicken breast, jars of peanut butter, meal replacement powders, bars. Those are all things you can have in your house anyway that you might eat over the year regardless. But it's good to always have a good stock of those because tuna cans flew off the shelf. Frozen meats. Get a little chest cooler and, you know, get into freezing meat. So next time this happens and you see a deal on meat, you know, stock up, maybe buy 7 days of meat that you need and then freeze another 7 or 14, however you want, because it lasts good 2 to 3 months, if not longer, in the freezer. Shop 2 weeks in advance. That's usually what I do. So I buy the Bell Evans chicken that comes already vacuum sealed. So the vacuum seal process makes the chicken good for long periods of time. So I usually will go in and I'll buy, 14 packs of chicken, and that will last me a good 2 weeks. So I usually will shop for a lot of base items way ahead of time, and then I'll trickle in the produce and things I need throughout the week. But at least the bulk shopping is done. So again, if you're ever in a bind, if something happens, you won't be cut off. Okay, guys, I hope this is helpful. I know there's many ways, and most important, I know a lot of you have a different situation. I have clients all over the world, and in some situations like Croatia, there is no food going in. They said earthquake, and different parts of the United States, depending where you are, specifically the cities, are all different situations. So I know some of this won't apply. I hope some of it does. But most important, like I said in closing before, we'll learn from this and we'll kind of get an idea of what to do for planning ahead. All right? Guys, if you have any questions, please comment below.